I spent about 8 hours preparing for today's sermon. The readings are rather difficult, and I finally completed the sermon this last Thursday at around midnight. I even uploaded it to my YouTube channel. Phew, 2 days before delivery. Check, I went to bed happy. But then, on Friday morning, I woke up to the news from the Supreme Court. Even though I expected it, I admit it hurt. It really hurt. Then I made the mistake of checking my Facebook page before going to work. Half the postings were from friends, Catholic and not, who essentially had a single comment. It's about time. At work, all Friday morning was like a blur. My mind was preoccupied by that recurring comment. It's about time. By the time I went back home, I decided that they were correct. It is about time. It is time to talk about these issues from the pulpit. Time to rewrite my sermon from scratch. On Friday, I started reflecting on the long spiral in which this little airplane we call Western society has been going on for the last 80 years. In 1930, the Anglican Church declared that birth control was permissible. That was the first Christian church to allow contraception. And people said, it's about time. In 1965, the Supreme Court declared birth control a constitutional right. And people said, it's about time. In 1973, the Supreme Court legalized abortion. And people said, it's about time. And this last Friday, the Supreme Court made same-sex marriage the law of the land. And people say, it's about time. But almost 2,000 years ago, in the year 67 AD, Paul wrote to Timothy saying, "For the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but having itching ears, they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own likings." And I say, it is that time. But what worries me most is not the opinion of the culture in general. That is no surprise. What worries me is the opinion of Catholics, many of them sitting right now in front of me. This year, a Pew Research survey showed that 57% of the general population was in favor of same-sex marriage. A lot, but not shocking. What was shocking is that of those who identified themselves as Catholic, 56% supported same-sex marriage, merely 1% less than the general population. That is a statistical tie. It seems like instead of us changing the world, we let the world change us. Little by little, we have been removing the church's wisdom from our daily lives. And just like in today's gospel story about the woman with the hemorrhage, the bleeding will not stop until we reach out to Christ. Every Sunday after the 11 o'clock Mass, I sit outside to meet with any interested high school students and young adults to answer what I call the tough questions. I have been doing this for a month, and we average about 10 people joining in this round table. As soon as we meet, I remind them of my promises to them. All questions are welcome. The tougher, the better. I will answer in honesty and in accordance with the Church's teachings. And I will always provide the rationale behind the answer. Never a dry yes-no answer, but always say yes or no, and this is why. I tell them that my goal is not necessarily to convince them of what the Church teaches us, but to show them that the church's teachings are not "believe this because the church tells you so" statements, but always, always are based on faith substantiated by sound reasoning. And I tell the youth, never disagree with any church teaching before you know the reasons that sustain it. But when it comes to faith and morals, disagreeing with what we do not know seems to be what we do best. How many of you have a PhD in theoretical physics? If I were to ask you, do you agree with Vasilyev's higher spin gauge theory on the origin of space and gravity? What would you answer? If you are like me, you would say, I cannot agree nor disagree with what I do not know. We all admit that regarding high-level mathematical models of theoretical physics, it is best for us to listen to those who have spent their lives studying them. But if I then ask you, do you agree with the church's position on birth control, or abortion, or same-sex marriage? Then even if you might not have any theological studies, or have read a single book of scripture, or any letter from the church's fathers, or any papal encyclical, you will probably give me an earful. It is plain illogical to disagree with what one does not understand, and one cannot understand unless one listens to the rationale of the arguments. As G.K. Chesterton would say, don't ever take a fence down until you know the reason why it was put up. Maybe we need to start a round table for the older generation too. Our lives are a process of conversion. We're meant to spend our lives learning more about God so that we can understand more about Him and transform ourselves more and more in His image. But many times we think that we are not the ones in need of conversion, but on the contrary, that God is the one who needs to be converted to become more like us. At the center of who we are is our soul, and it is through the soul's intellect that we know, and through the soul's will that we decide to love. And that knowledge and will are meant to work in perfect harmony. Decision is sustained by knowledge. The more we know, the more we love. Today I ask you to realize that we are bleeding. Realize that we are letting go thousands of years of wisdom at the stroke of uninformed decisions. Give the church a chance to teach you her age-tested wisdom. Next time you find yourself disagreeing with the church, make sure you know what you're disagreeing with. And before you call the diocese or the pastor complaining that my preaching made you uncomfortable, think about what part of it was not Catholic teaching, and honestly review the soundness of your disagreement. Let me be clear. I am not preaching out of hatred, but on the contrary, out of love. I am honored to count among my friends many homosexuals that I fully respect and from whom I have learned many virtuous things. I also have people very close and very dear to me who actively promote pro-abortion rights. But the brightness of their virtues does not blind me from disagreeing with some of their opinions. Love and accept everybody as the brothers and sisters that they are. The first step to love someone is to know the person, spend time together, and see things from their shoes. This will prompt us to recognize and accept both our similarities and differences. But do not confuse acceptance with agreement. For acceptance does not mean to blend us all in, but to recognize and listen to each other's arguments. Acceptance is an act of love, but it is only its first step. For true love calls us not just to wish another person's good, but to act on it. Love is best represented by the works of mercy, and the first three spiritual works of mercy are to instruct the one who does not know, to counsel the one who is in doubt, and to admonish the one who has gone astray. Mercy is love in steroids, and works of mercy are the perfect reflection of our mutual love. After Friday's ruling, our Bishop McElroy released a statement in which he says, "The diocese will continue to honor the uniqueness of marriage between one man and one woman as a gift of God." And then he adds that we will do so in a manner which profoundly respects at every moment the loving and familial relationships which enrich the lives of so many gay men and women who are our sons and daughters, our sisters and brothers, and ultimately our fellow pilgrims on this earthly journey of life. And finally, do not let yourselves be fooled by those who say that the church is old-fashioned and antiquated. They actually fall short, because the church is much, much worse than that. The church is eternal, and so are God and His truth.